Even if we digitize our languages, but if we don't take care of people who are taking care of those infrastructures, what we're doing is going to be fruitless at the end of the day. Then how do we take care of those people? Skills transfer, capacity workshops. So these workshops, when we engage, when we learn, and when we do these workshops, we actually get to have a moment of reflection. Like as I'm speaking now, I'm actually learning some things about this project. Say, oh, but this should have been done this way. So these are important. We are also looking forward to engagement with the playbook. Tell us what you think. Yeah, I think that is pretty much I can say about community engagements. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fiti, for your great introduction and the benefits of data and the need for community engagement. So the question is, after we decide that data, what can we do with it? So the ultimate goal of collecting or engaging the community and having that data is to process our language. That's why this natural language processing comes from. So the ultimate goal of that processing data or device data is just to make our data accessible to the AI ecosystem. So to do that, the basic thing is to embed the language. So computers don't understand what I'm talking about or what I'm writing. So all those text data or voice data or speech data must be embedded in a way that machines can understand it. So the background of understanding that text or voice data is just to embed the language in a way that computers understand. So what that embedding do? So the embedding actually do just learn the semantic structure of the language, the dialectics or the agnatic or the morphological behavior of that language. So the existing models that currently we have is developed for Indo-European language. So they are not efficient to understand our language effectively because they are developed for those types of languages. So the question is how can we embed it or how can we develop embedded algorithms or tools to embed those languages effectively to process or and to use and to interpret or to do what that NLP task is needed. So embedding is the basic thing, the way of translating or representing words as a vector form in high dimensional space. Just after representing the words in embedding, then we can do whatever we like with our machines. So that another basic definition of embedding.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abego. I think one can now have a gist feeling of what embeddings are and why are they so critical to our languages, because it's not just we are collecting it, building up into corpuses. There is still some digitization that needs to happen. And now, for us to be able to have the confidence that what I'm extracting has the meaning, context to meaning of a specific language, is now being embedded in from a technical point of view, where certain accuracies or certain percentages or levels that gets reached from the data, one can be convinced that data is language, gives me confidence that a percentage can have an extent. Thank you so much for that basic intro. So Dr. Chigli, with the success of the project that you have just done, and looking ahead in the next 5 to 10 years, what would success of African language technology look like in the next 5 to 10 years? And while on that, what role can each of us sitting here play to make that vision into a reality? Thank you again. I'll go back to the conversation that I spoke about when we opened about the fact that I used to ask my colleague that who is the end user of this work that we're doing? And I was saying to him, as a writer, or if my students who are studying today, they don't benefit from this, for me, I don't see how this is useful. And I was still saying to him, we have these workshops, Dr. Seani. When they end, when we finish it, the conversation ends. And that's the problem that I had with sending my students to the workshops. They want to know how can they participate. If they want to do language digitization, for example, with the Sadina terminology workshop, Wikipedia. My students go to the workshop, they speak about, oh, this is how you do this, this is how you do this. The workshop ends, then the conversation is over. So for me, success looks like I have a BA student, a Black student who is doing BA languages. You ask them, why are you doing this? And they say, because I was accepted into the course. And then you say, so what are you going to do? Where are you going to work? They say, I don't know. And then I go and say, but you know, even outside of language practice, this is what you can do. These are the options that you can look at. And then the student says, but then how do I access it? Where do I do that? And I'm like, I don't. That for me does not look like success. And my work, being working between the African languages departments and the computer science department, for me, success will look like a bridge between that. For me, this project will be successful if my students, they are employed as validators in this, and they are involved in this, and they are working. When I say my students, it's because my students are first year students, and in 5 years, they'll be done with their degrees, right? And as a teacher myself, I look at issue of employability as well. If we're going to have these projects, but the very same students that we're teaching are not employable within these ecosystems or spaces that they're building, it's problematic for me. So those are the questions that keep me awake at night. Going back to your question, Jessica, about funding, I'm thinking of how to also keep them in the ecosystem, but in ways that they also benefit, in ways that they also get to make a living for themselves. Because I cannot tell a first year student that I'll do this for the social good, do this because it's for your language. He has to eat, he needs to be employable, he has to earn a living. Can we also make this sustainable in those ways as well? And I'm thinking about that, and we're writing proposals, and we hope we get the money and we become accountable and we employ young people, or even if we don't employ them, keep them to do the skills transfer, so that when they finish this process, they are employable outside of the university. So I'm bringing different contexts, but for me, that's what success looks like. Thank you so much, Dr. Seani, for those insights. Shortly after the panelists of our open to questions and discussions as the panel discussion is possible. Dr. Berkeley, what are the main challenges that you face in growing the standards for learning studying, and what are the successes, what are the needs, and with this limited data set, how can you build quality analytics? And with sitting in a room full of various studies altogether, or various focuses of the scientists, and so forth, what awareness can you raise to them with regards to your first study?
One of the challenges for creating this quality embedding is ultimate challenge is the data challenge. We have limited text data in Sepedi and Setswana. I try to find opportunity to work with Sepedi in Setswana and its two language. Actually, I don't speak all of them, but one of my challenges when I try to force the model and try to test if my embedding works well, I have to know the language. different clusters. I will show you if possible. Is when I want to cluster the language to bring that quality ready. Someone needs to be a language expert needs to be there. This model is working well for this tool terms or terminology in that language is clustered well together. So the main challenge for this low source languages, just when we try to break down the sentence into words or tokens, we have to know the meaning of that token of word because computer try to understand the sub level representation of the language. So to present that as a better representation, we have to know the language. You can't break each of because the representation of the language is different. Some of the languages are native, so some are morphological rich. Most of African language again have different dialects, and some of them have tonal because of that tone, the meaning changes. So we have to encode all those features in the language. So to encode those, we need those language experts because that is a big challenge. We don't have a language or an NLP tool that considers the tone or the native nature of the language. So that was a big challenge. So when we try to build use different techniques to just tokenize or embedding this, we have to develop a certain method for to just handle that case. But we need again this language expert to validate because that makes more of that embedding. After we develop a model, we have to validate. So we don't have that benchmark data set. We don't have that validated data set in CPD or SEX1. So we try to have some data set from the lab, around 8 million thousand sentences. When we try to have take a unique words, we have around 130,000 unique vocabularies. Using that one, we try to build a model. For those large language models, they use about 46 billion or 480 billion sentences when they develop. We need such kind of that to have a quality embedding. So the committee must engage on just having or providing that. So that way, we think the success is we already have some volunteers or some language experts who give at least that everything.
Thank you so much for that. Can I simply say you've been working on Sibeli for far too long? Did you understand the points? Open the floor for questions. Yes.
Thank you so much, speakers, Chair, for the wonderful remarks. My name is Tatsun Mugwana. I'm from University of Pretoria, and I've worked with Prof. Mukosi on his MIT capstone project, on a project that was related to language, particularly Spain, as I'm a native speaker of the language. I repeated the project that I did last year, this year with a different set of students. And one of the things that I wanted to achieve was getting what Dr. Chidi was talking about, the human validation side. Because just to give a gist of the project, we're basically creating an AI chatbot for rabies awareness in Spain. And what the students did last year was to take existing LLMs such as ChatGPT and Gemini and take from what they have and translate the knowledge in English into Spain. And you can imagine the mix-up that happened there because these LLMs are not trained to recognize the difference between Sesotho, Sepedi, and Setswana. So, because we did not have the expertise at the time, I repeated the project this year and then I engaged the language department. I think I engaged with Dr. Chidi at some point, but she was overly committed at the time. Now I see what she was overly committed on. But fortunately, some of her colleagues came in and did the human validations. And as we delve deeper into the project, we realized that actually there is language is shaped by politics, culture, economy, and all of these other things. Sepedi, as we come to know it, is not singular. There is many different dialects of this language. How do we account for all of them into this single LLM? How do we pool all that knowledge to make it relevant in these different pockets of the country? And that's the first part of my question to the panel. And the second part is, how do we make a business case for it? Because the reason Elia already mentioned that English, Spanish, Mandarin, French are so big in the eyes is that cross-culturally they are spoken. There's a numerical business case for them. No matter the colonial influences that have shaped that, but then there is a business case for them. How do we put that for our low resource languages, or will this just exist within research for now?
Maybe I can take the last question and so we can take the one of how do we pull the
different dialects
into one.
Yeah.
So, when I spoke about sustainability ecosystem, and taking care of the human resource that actually builds the ecosystem, I actually meant issue of employability. Because we cannot have this is an expensive way to do, to be honest, and we cannot have it end in research. And we can also not continue to encourage people that for the social growth, one day AI will speak your language. No, that's not good enough for me, So I'm imagining a situation or scenario where African languages they are used to facilitate economic transactions. And I'll give an example in South Africa about when we are looking for a job, they say, at least be bilingual. And you'd be so happy, oh, I know Suzuki, Suzana, can't they don't even mean that. They mean no Africans in English, And do you see how now language is being used against African people or people who don't know certain languages, right? So can we have a situation or whatever we're doing in digitizing African languages, can they inform African languages, facilitating economic and business transactions? Can people or skills be recognized without language being an influence? Can you look at me and say, can Tushar do the job? Yes, but can Tushar just speak the language? No. Can I still be relevant, employable within it? So I'm kind of imagining that there's a step towards kind of the business function of the business case around it, where African languages can actually have an impact on the business. Patrick, let me kind of pause it there. I have other examples in my mind.
We can have
but we can have a discussion about it. But I don't know if I tried to.
Not the feeling I've answered question.
Okay, that was the dialect thing is one the challenge. Now I don't know how that dialect works there in that language, so that's why I need some language experts with me. So the same way when I try to tokenize the sentence, I try to put it just as words by posting the context. Maybe somewhat tokenization may be helpful for the quality of the embedding. But to do that somewhat tokenization, we need language expert. If I try to break that word into three places, I don't know the meaning. I don't know how to validate that one. So the only thing I do for my extended model just to break the sentence as it is. But that is not representative for the language. So that word may have different meaning, different contexts. So some language expertise is there to validate and to have a better reading also. Yeah, we need to really affect stuff.
Another thing? Good day. A small question. It's just mostly thoughts. One, my name is Moderator. I am a cultural strategist. I have masters in visual cultural studies, and in my masters in particular, I was looking at the visualization of Babedi marriage. And in that work, I worked specifically with two archives. The Fanfarmelo archive that the University of Pretoria has custodianship over, and the Hoffman missionary archive that he was working in the Masielana area in what is now Ramama home. I'm a Bedi native myself, so that's Bedi too, right? And one of the two things that were happening around the time that I was doing my is at the time the university was in the process of digitizing the archive, the Fanfarmelo archive. So every time I went to, I think it's level 4, I'd have to navigate between all the section of the material that you're looking for. Because I was working in an archive, it means that a bit of context for thinking and given people don't know what I'm talking about. So the Fanfarmelo archive is consisting of manuscript that Nicholas Fanfarmelo, as a Minister of Native Affairs in the Wood era, was in charge of. So what he did is he asked ethnographers, what we call ethnographers, or what we would now in this conversation call communities or bearers of indigenous knowledge, to write down whatever cultural, ethnographic, livelihood knowledge that they had. This pertained to religion, to cultural customs, to traditions, to everyday living. So there is nothing in that archive that you won't find, from riddles to stories, to Nonwani, Digelengeta, to how chiefs formed themselves, how disputes were ethnography, right? So I took that. So that is not from somebody else's perspective. It's not a Mr. Stewart coming in and studying the people. No. This is the people telling of themselves who they are, how they are living, and how they are doing life. And Fanfarmelo did not do anything with that information but collected and archived, right? So now I take that and I compare that to a missionary who is amongst the people, observing the people, and then writing that information as part of his report to his German bosses, where he got. So now you've got this archive of knowledge of people that is from two different perspectives, right? So now, one of the things that we find when we are looking at African languages is the challenge of translation, right? So what we have with indigenous knowledges, which is a challenge that we are presented with in this technological era, is one, our languages are more orator-based than they are written. So those are two different modes and ways of interacting and engaging with the language. So when we are speaking something and when we are writing something, we are dealing with two different things. And that's why the question of orthography then becomes a problem. Because which one do you authorize? Because then you've got different dialects. But the same Sepedi. So now which one then becomes the one? And that's why there was that whole debate about Northern Sepedi, Northern Sesotho versus Sepedi, and that is still a non-concluded debate even today. Yes, you would use Northern Sesotho, and then but some people still don't agree with it. So my challenge as we are sitting here is I find that as a people, I'm going to say as Black people, we are trying to fit ourselves, or as South African people, we're trying to fit ourselves into a model that cannot accommodate us. We are too diverse and too multifaceted to be fitting into one box. And us in trying to fit into one box is us coming up with all these frustrations that we sit with here. Our languages are not low resource. They are low resource in the model and the perspective from which we are looking at. And that's why they are coming across
as low resource. And then we can go political as well and look at the history where we come from and the trajectory that the country chose to take post-apartheid and post Third World and company going into democracy, right? Because we had the opportunity to maybe seclude and find our identity as a country, or do what we did, which is open our doors to everyone, and then that then influence how we then identify. So our diversity is not a challenge. It is a challenge because of the way in which we function and the status quo in which we function in. My proposal is that we don't try to fit into the world, but we stand tall in our diversity and our uniqueness, and we find solutions to our challenges and not try to put our challenges into the models that exist and then try to fit that, because we can't. We are too diverse, we are too multifaceted, we are too unique to fit into that one shoe box. And that's why we are finding ourselves with problems of translation, trying to translate our languages into ways that cannot be translated, trying to orthographize things that cannot. And all of those things just goes to show that the mode in which we are looking at ourselves, or the perspective with which we are looking at ourselves, is a misinterpretation. And that's why we'll come with mis and misnomers and misinterpretations. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we're not giving a question, but there's something when I was writing my notes that I wrote with regards to the survey responses of the survey we did. And it reads as: draw closer emotional and linguistic labor required to participate in an ecosystem that does not operate in your home language. So it speaks of power dynamics of, I would say, in isiZulu or in Isindebele, we say this in South Africa. And you are saying it in Zimbabwe, it's irrelevant, it doesn't count. So it's exactly what you mean, you know. There's so much emotional and linguistic labor that goes there and ends up not being recognized. Can you imagine you're responding to a survey, then you later lay on the table and you realize that what you said has not even been considered because the researchers killed their days.
Thank you so much, Dr. I see there's a couple of questions in the room. But something we can point out on is to the another question is, what role do we now have a problem, and we all agree that there's a problem, but what role do African communities have to do or be part of to ensure that we participate in a better digitization of our languages? Is it something that we want to do voluntarily, or it should be compensated? But something that we can put up on, because we now know that we have a problem with different dialects, what you mentioned, but what role is everybody in here thinking, wanting to play into solving this problem? Yes,
my thoughts are a bit scattered. I'm going to go on a reflection, right? Going back to the 2000s, and Mixed and To Go is popular, right? And people are fascinated. I remember I was one of the people who was fascinated with getting, like, the quicker you respond, like, right? BRB, everything, right? That convenience. And then now, time goes on, you get to acknowledge that at times, for me especially, it's easier to speak Sepedi than to have to write it. And sometimes it's not because I don't want to. Sometimes maybe I'm in a hurry and then I'm trying to type ciao. And I know that the keyboard, I can't just say, like, it's even worse on a laptop or when you have like an actual keyboard. It's better on the phone because you have to hold the S and have like a whole tray of the other things. And it got me thinking about how we ourselves be excluding or avoiding to respond in Sepedi because it's convenient not to respond in Sepedi, right? So yeah, that's the first thing that was running into my mind. And then now years have passed. I edit work, some like podcasts, some music visualizers, and when I'm creating shorts, like let's say YouTube shorts, and then I'm like, okay, cool. I don't want to create them myself. Let me have Limora or Opus to do that for me, right? And this is a podcast that has people who were multilingual, right? And then some of the interesting points are insipid. But when I have those auto-generated shorts, either when it has the captions, it messed up the captions, which means that I would have to do what I was not supposed to do or what I was avoiding to do because of like time, right? That gets me to the fact that I am now excluding my language for the sake of convenience, right? Yeah, got me thinking just about that. I don't know if it's a question. And then, but then there's the other thing in terms of someone might say, maybe because people don't understand the language, they don't interact with it that much. And then Soli is someone who enjoys watching anime. And one of the most exciting things that I know I enjoy is just watching anime and it's in Japanese. And I'm just reading subtitles and it goes to a point that I kind of like understand Japanese, like watashi wa sori desu, dozo yoroshiku, right? Because I've been listening to it so much and I forget the fact that not speaking English does not mean something is inconvenient, right? Yeah, so that's the scattered thoughts that are running in my head right now.
I like the thoughts. You have your book or that question. That was the hand of the prayer. Yes.
I'd like to add to both speakers' questions. Maybe a slightly unpopular opinion, but it's a question I have. I'm wondering whether, because I think the problem with the issue of our diversity is not particularly in dogs. I think it's something that exists in every culture in language. And I think modern languages have found a way to make their languages efficient for standardized. And so I'm wondering if sometimes by the preservation of our diversity, we aren't also in fact limiting our efficiency and how that affects how we implement it technologically.
Yeah, I think I'll kind of tie it to the point about context, you know, and going to Mati to say, for example, today that it's even wrong to say it's different dialects because dialect gets people say more and it's a more means not official less reduced, right? Then we now say this version or from this region, it's the standardized, it's the accepted, right? Perhaps what we should try to do is we should say, this means this. It can also mean that. I can also say it means this. So we do have different variations of the language being represented. Because they end up not doing that, looking at the efficiency that and completely misunderstand what you're saying. So I'm just thinking that context is relevant in this case. And then working with language experts, which we have language training can actually come into space and pick up that, yeah. Because, like I say, it's dangerous. If you don't standardize, you don't get efficiencies. So it's how to decide which.
Hello.
Hi.
You guys forgot us completely that we're online.
Okay, let's talk Dr. Abby. There's still a hand in the room. Yes, Dr. Abby.
Okay, I just wanted to create, maybe the second, there was a discussion in terms of our language is not low resources. Well, nobody is saying our language is low resources. But when you look at it from the perspective of low resources, what they mean is to say our language does not have enough digital data or digital representations or digital tool or computational resources that could be built or support the modern natural language processing like LLM and all that that has been uh, that has come to stay. So that's basically what we're saying. That we're not saying that our language is low resources, but when you look at everything around large language model and the tool that is available on AI today that we call AI or generative AI or something like that, they're actually being built upon the the most spoken languages in the world, English, French, and German. But because our own data set, our own language are simply there is no enough digital data or tool or computational resources to support most of those models. That is where, I mean, the scientists to some extent refer to our language as low resources. I just want to clear that a little bit. Now, in terms of what has been discussed so far, or what we're discussing, one of the major problems that I think from our own perspective that we have um, with what we're discussing is basically to be number one, we have a problem of which is known to everyone, data scarcity, right? And this data scarcity also leads to calling our language as low resources. And when you look at especially most of the site, I mean, in the space that we find ourselves, it's been cited that data scarcity is actually a problem. Second thing is that I also agree that our language, especially the African languages, it is incredible. I mean, very, let me use the word, we have, our language is diverse. And what makes our language diverse is the issue of uh, tonations. I mean, tone system, complex morphology and code switching. I mean, there's no anybody that is here that I will ask the questions. In terms of all the 11 languages of South Africa, everyone that is here approximately can speak at least about 5 of them. So you find out that in terms of dialect, uh, our language is so diverse. So the question now is that the most recent technology that we have today does not have that intelligence to be able to understand that diversity, right? So what we are trying to do is to say, let's start from a very small point to say, can we be able to collect couples of this data? Even though they are diverse, in whichever way they are diverse, can we have them in their digital form? Then we can now go to the extent of using it to ascertain the already existing large language model, to test them so that we can able to improve this particular language in a way that will be more comfortable to us to improve our community, improve our infrastructure, also add more of digitalizations to what we do. So that's just what I wanted to contribute. I hope it's thanks. I forced myself into it, so never mind.
So much, Dr. Abi, for those great insights. We have Dr. Olubayo, who was also part of this project. Doctor, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I just have one